Hi. One of the highlights of the past month or so was that I got to have an extended conversation with young adult and middle grade novelist Mitali Perkins about her newest book, Forward Me Back to You, which is my favorite book that I've read this year. It's the story of a group of kids who go to India on a missions trip, but it's not what they expect. And I don't want to say too much more. There's a couple of little intriguing pieces in this. This is the extended version of the interview, and I will do a shorter version, but I hated to edit it because she was such a joy to talk to. So I hope you enjoy. People were saying, what other calls do you have? We were talking about all the calls, and I'm like, well, my next one's pretty exciting. And so I had this, so I held it up and I said, has anyone read Forward Me Back to You, or has anyone read Mitali Perkins before? And this sixth grade teacher goes, has anyone not read Mitali Perkins?
Well, that's because Alex has had me come to the school so many times. I'm a local celebrity there. Oh, I love going to that school. That's a great school. Yeah.
Well, it's so nice because the kids then know you because they feel like they've seen you. You're such an engaging speaker, so they've seen you speak.
Yeah, that's nice.
So it's a nice recognition thing when I get your books. They're like, oh yeah, I know her.
I kind of feel like I'd be dead in the water without my Betsy Tacy folks, though. I feel like you guys keep me floating, through career dips. You guys show up to my events and buy my books and talk about them. I'm like, what would I do? It would be interesting to do it. It's a Wonderful Life, go back in my career without my Betsy Tacy friends and see what a flop I would be. And then it's a wonderful love life.
I think you'd be okay, but it's a great community.
Yeah, I'm working on a book right now, actually. It's a nonfiction book. It's called When We Loved Reading, and it's taking a look at 12 classics that I reread every year and looking at like deeper themes of character and virtue and beauty and different things. And then one of them, of course, is Emily of Deep Valley. So it's going to be really fun to write if I can ever get my butt in gear and not procrastinate.
What What are some of the other ones?
Heidi, I think. Have you ever read Heidi by Joanna Spyri?
A long time ago.
Yeah, it's a good one because it's all about the parable of the prodigal son.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just interwoven deeply into that book. And so what's fun about revisiting classics that you read as a kid and loved is that you get to add in all the layers of your own age that you can see now. And the older, every decade, I feel like I see more deeper things in some of these books, like Emily of Deep Valley. And just every time I read it, there's this deeper reception of it, which is really fun. Yeah, the Slough of Despond. Whenever you're in that situation where you're feeling trapped and constrained and you have no choices, that's a book to read for sure. And stand in your own defense. Stand in your own defense. Yeah, that's right.
That's such a good
one. Okay, I'll let you take us into the interview now for your students.
Okie dokie.
You and I could talk forever about
I know.
Yeah.
Okay, so successful writer Mitali Perkins, I am here to ask you about specifically your research process. I just read Forward Me Back to You and then cried for 45 minutes when I finished it because it was so beautiful. But one of the things that stuck out for me, and this is a terrible admission, but I'm not great at visualizing or feeling place when I'm reading. I don't build visuals in my mind for the books that I've read. This book I felt like I was there. I could picture the hotel, as he said. I could picture the coffee shop. It felt like those places were really real to me. And so I'm curious about, when have you been back to Kolkata? What is your experience with people who are working to end human trafficking and all that stuff?
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I really work hard on place. I love place. It's one of my favorite things because it's an advantage we have over movies as writers, because we have access to all of your history of your five senses. And so when you integrate that into a place and you really bring someone there, you're bringing their imagination with smell and taste and touch, which movie makers really can't do. They're stuck with sight and sound. So I feel like it's really an advantage, although they're trying, right? They're releasing smells and things, but it's not the same as when I get your imagination engaged. So thanks for that compliment. That's a goal of mine. And that's why I can't write fantasy, Barb, because I have to have been in a place with all five of my own senses to take a reader there. And definitely with Kolkata, I've been there. I've visited those places. I've visited homes for the girls. I've been in small apartments there. I've been to churches there, and um, the open spaces that I describe, and sitting in the back of an auto rickshaw, and coming off the airport for the first time. All of that is something I've experienced with all five of my own senses. So yes, definitely all those places where, and you embellish. You can do that when you're a fiction writer. You can, you're given license to lie and embellish, so that's fun. So yeah, make things up, but still, they're definitely based. All of those places that you mentioned and more are based in real life places that I've visited and spent time in, and that's why I tried to set the book. Each scene is in one place, so I try to set it almost cinematically. You know, when you shift from scene to scene in a movie, it's always anchored by where are they is it taking place. So each
Okay.
of my scenes in that book is anchored by place, and you can see how it's, and that helped me. You know, those are classic directions out of a screenplay that I used, and it helped me because I had to really center that scene in that place. So
I didn't even catch that. That's so cool.
it was fun. It really helped me. It was a good technique to use for myself as a writer.
Your maiden name is Bose, Bose.
Yes, yes.
That's the name of the family that they stay with, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very common Bengali name, and I wanted to throw it in, and I understand. Names are very specific there by caste, and so I sort of knew that family name because it's my own. So I didn't want to write a caste that I wasn't familiar with as much. So I kind of wanted to choose something that was within the same range as my family, middle class Bengali, from that particular caste. Which I know I'm not a fan of the caste system, but it does help. It helped me with my research because it allowed me to be a little more authentic because I know that name.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. That never would have occurred to me
It's sort of
as a
like a
teen.
Smith or a Jones,
Yeah.
Bose. It's a pretty common name, so.
One of the things that I loved about the book, in a lot of YA, church and religion and faith are sometimes the bad guy. And in this book, they're a place of comfort and a place of acceptance. I love the way that a church community was illustrated here.
Mm.
Would you? I don't really have a question other than to say,
Well,
well
I
done.
I think I don't know if you've ever heard the song by Bob Dylan. It's an oldie, but it's called "Shelter in the Storm." In fact, on Lady Gaga's concert she just did recently, or no, on Saturday Night Live, the last 2 weeks ago, Saturday Night Live, somebody did a remake of that song, and it talks about just somebody who received you as a shelter in the storm,
Mhm.
and I've always associated that song with church for me because I think if you grow up with church, it annoys you and you take it for granted, and everything about it just drives you. That you can see all the hypocrisies and all the stupidity. So, but I was an outsider to church. I didn't grow up with any of it.
Ah.
So didn't know anything about like church culture. But all I felt was that welcome, that shelter in the storm. That there's a line in that song that says, "She was standing there with silver bangles on her wrists and flowers in her hair." And kind of giving her, and I was always pictured the larger church community welcoming me, and I've experienced that from the little old ladies that would just come in and hug me when I first started going. So I wanted to write that side of church, and it was easier to write it as an outsider than it was maybe growing up in the church. I think it's harder to write that much warmth for the
Mhm.
church, but it's an honest experience that I myself have experienced, so easy to write. From Kat's perspective, she too was an outsider in the
Right.
church. She had never been. I remember that first time sitting in a church and thinking, "Who are these weirdos? And what am I doing here?" And they would use that church language like in the narthex or the sanctuary. What are they saying? Who are these crazies? So I was able to write that from Kat's perspective, but also the way that community, that small, little diverse community of all generations, was able to draw her in and love her, and I felt that. So
The adoption issue with
Ravi, yeah.
Ravi, yeah. You had to do that, huh?
How did I do that?
I don't want to say what happened, but you made a choice as an author that I found
Sad.
sad. Didn't you just want him to?
Yes, I wanted him so badly, so badly. So I can show you a picture of my little Ravi. There's one.
Aw, doesn't the other one look just like him? Aren't they twins?
Yes, they're identical twins. So myself, am not adopted, but I have adopted these two boys, and as they've
Oh,
grown, they're older now. Uh, I just feel like my connection to their first mother is it just keeps deepening and deepening, and my desire for her well-being and just my gratitude to her, it's just kind of grown as I've moved forward in parenting. So this book was sort of a tribute to her,
mm,
even though I'll not know her, I probably will never meet her. But and also to the boys and their experience, because I did a lot of research on people trying to reunite with birth families, and there's always those happy videos where you see people and they
hmm.
find them, and it's so beautiful. But a lot of the times you don't find people, or you find them and it's not a
That's
happy
not
ending.
good.
And so it's very complex, that reunion of finding the first family. And so I wanted to write about that, but the whole theme of the book really is that sometimes when you're looking for a happy ending or some sort of you have this deep wish to have something, a desire, sometimes it you don't get it, but you get something else in return. And it really is, yeah. So that's the story. And if you look back over the book, there's a metaphor of this red scarf in the
Yeah,
book.
Kat wears the red scarf.
Yeah, Grandma V gives her a red scarf, and throughout the book there's a mention of that red scarf, and that red scarf is really a metaphor of this the suffering that we each endure in our lives. There's going to be things that happen to us, painful things that we have no control over, and so that red scarf kind of symbolizes that pain or whatever trial that comes into our life. But then that becomes the heart of our story in some ways. That very thing that we think, we just, oh my gosh, why did this have to happen, can sometimes be the thing that brings our deepest contribution to the planet. So not always, but sometimes it can. And so I tried to. So when if your readers are going to read the book, just pay attention to the every time the red scarf comes into the story, who hands it to whom, how it's worn, what happens to it. That's the metaphor for that theme in that book.
Well, now I have to read the whole thing over again.
Barb, what made you cry at the end? Why'd you cry so much?
I guess I cried because she just the healing, like so much healing that you didn't see, and so many characters, like so many. I just love so many of the characters, like the big fat boy that's friends with he gets to have his travel company. He talks his dad into letting him fulfill his dream. Like, you didn't have to throw that in there, but it was there. Like, I
Yeah.
loved that, and I loved, the okay, I don't know if this is a spoiler. Let me know if you think it's a spoiler and I won't put it in. But I loved that Kat and Ravi, there was never any romance.
Yeah.
There was the love of friendship there, but I was like, "Oh man, I mean, I know Kat and Ravi are going to end up together because this is a YA novel, but what about that cute little bird girl that, seems to really like him? She's going to get her little heart broken." And so I love that, that the relationships felt true. Nothing felt like it was manufactured for drama. It all
Oh
felt like
no.
these were how real people, and like, I don't know, just like,
That's so nice to hear, because I wanted to write a friendship between a guy and a girl that didn't have to have any romantic undertones. In fact, that was crucial for Kat's healing, right? She
oh
had to have
yeah.
a friendship with a guy who she knew she could feel totally safe with, without that ever even coming into play. And he had this gut instinct that he had developed from all of his own stuff that allowed him to protect her in that way, and she was able to protect him too. So it was
Mm.
very mutual in their giving back and forth, that their relationship was really central to the healing. They had to both play their roles in each other's lives as friends before they could move forward. So yeah, that was really fun to write. I have had good guy friends. I know you have too. You're kind of a guys. You can hang out with guys, right? So yeah, yeah, we could pound the beers, and it's stereotypical, but I think just also really sensitive guys. I have,
Yeah.
well, one of my sons is really sensitive, and the other one's kind of a guy's guy, and so, but I just love spending time with both of them. So yeah, it's fun, and I think it's underestimated in our lives, the power of just friendships with whoever and
Yeah.
whatever gender identity. It's just fun to have lots of different kinds of
Well, and
friendship.
also not just gender, but age.
Yeah.
Grandma V and Kat are, 60 years apart, 70 years apart. And I couldn't get a beat on her age, but she was old. And yet that friendship and that caring, like it's just a really nice illustration of that.
Right. Well, that's one of the things you love about teaching, right? Is that friendships that you have with your students, and you're being a librarian. I know you're thinking about them the whole time you're in quarantine because it's such a fun gift to have a friendship, a real friendship with somebody of a totally different generation. I actively pursue that. My mom, of course, is old, and I have that natural relationship. But I actively pursue relationships outside of my generation because just being with people our age is, after a while, you're like, oh, we're all talking about the same thing, and taking care of our old parents and watching our adult kids, and it's fine. It's fine. I'm not denigrating that, but it's nice to talk about 20 somethings who are thinking, well, do I love this person? Do I take this job?
Mhm.
What's gonna happen? The 20s are a tough time of life, I think, and they need people who can really stand with them and say, I'm for you here. I'm not your parent, but I'm for you. So it's really fun. In fact, this afternoon I have a call with a 20 something friend of mine. I really try to keep that generational friendship thing. It's
Mm,
very valuable. It's one
it
of the things
is.
I love about church. It's one of the ways to make relationships outside your generation is
Yeah.
one of the natural places is church. So
Yeah. I have to ask, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, what is your
yeah,
experience?
zero. That was my biggest stretch. I had to research that so much. I watched a million videos. I have a friend online who's an ex cop. She's a tiny little woman, and I was asking on social media, does anybody know anything about Brazilian Jiu Jitsu to read my scenes? And she said, oh yeah, I'm like a whatever belt, I can't even remember now. And so she read all the scenes that I wrote, and she just did little tweaks for me and said, her leg wouldn't go here, or just really coached me on the. So I wanted someone who's good at it to read it and say, oh, wow, this is right. This is what it's about. So that was a big stretch because I'm so that to me seems so claustrophobic, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, because you have to actually endure a hold, being held down,
Hmm.
and then break out of it. So it's a really great self defense skill because you're actually being taught how to break away from an attack or like break away from a hold. But for me, initially, just when you have to start being held down, I would be dead of claustrophobia. So the more I learned about it, the more it's one of the few self defense that allows a smaller person to really break off and escape, not to pummel them or fight them, but to get out of a tight situation.
I
So it's a
almost smell a metaphor here, Mitali.
yeah, there you go. That's like maybe I have to think about that now, Barb. Interesting. Yes, maybe that's why it came to mind because I did look at a lot of different. I wanted her to be good at strong. I wanted her to
Yeah.
be really, really strong. So I looked at a lot of different self defense, and that's the one I landed on because it was a really good one that allows people of different sizes to have a fair fight. Yeah, yeah. So that is a metaphor, right, of the book. Yeah, good
Um,
job, librarian.
I thought you must be studying Brazilian Jiu Jitsu because it did feel like an insider's
Oh
view of it.
gosh, I took a kickboxing class once, and they were all young people and me. And I thought I was feeling so like I was punching and I was kicking and I was feeling so tough, Barb. And then I caught my sight of myself in the mirror, and
No.
I said, "Who's this old lady doing the cha cha?" This was like I looked like I was doing a little dance, in my mind, I was thinking, "Oh man, I'm like pummeling, I'm brutal." It was mortifying. I tried my kickboxing. Didn't give up.
The last thing I wanted to ask you about is the human trafficking and recovery from human trafficking, how it's investigated, how they catch people, the ones who are coming out of this life, how they manage to reintegrate. I mean, what kind of research did you do? Is this something that's been on your heart for a while?
Exactly. It's been something that's been in my heart for. As you're talking, I'm thinking, man, I worked hard on this book. I did a boatload of research. My one before, You Bring the Distant Near, it was mostly memoir. I just sort of wrote scenes from my life, and this one, man, it was arduous, but it was great research. I learned so much, and I was able to visit the homes and meet some of the women who run the homes, and it was just an amazing chapter of my life, and not still continuing because we support them, and so it's amazing to see the hope and the resilience that these girls have, and how they can re-enter, and they're striving hard to recover their power, and it's very inspiring. It's also very, you see the best and the worst of human nature, that what can happen, what we can do to each other at our worst, and what we can do for each other at our best. So it's both hopeful and despairing at the same time. But it's, human trafficking is growing. It's one of the fastest growing in the criminal world, in the criminal economy. It's one of the fastest growing economies, especially when it comes to online trafficking. And so, whenever you're online and you're looking at an image, you have to ask yourself, is this person trafficked? Because you don't know. Even if it's like an Instagram model or something, you're thinking, oh, she's posting pictures of herself. But there's almost always a backstory, financially or something, that is causing a young person, especially someone who's underage, to have to use their bodies for profit. Even just the consumption of it is a responsibility. We have to really guard it for clicking, guard that, because we're actually contributing to trafficking by consuming. They track every click, they track, and so you're actually contributing to the suffering of another human being by clicking on something. And so we're all in it together. We have to, and the United States is the number one consumer of online human trafficking, especially child trafficking, when it comes to that. So that's part of the message I try to tell people. But so thanks for letting me say that, because it's something that's dear to my heart. When you meet the girls and you see them and you think, if one more person makes a buck off this little girl, I'm just gonna. My website, I have, when you go to click on the Forward Me Back to You button, I have resources there. I have organizations that you can find out more, and all kinds of stuff there. So especially International Justice Mission, that's a good one, because they do a lot of police training. You can, if you don't have an honest police force, you're in a country that you're just in big trouble, because you can't trust the police. The poorest of the poor really suffer if you can't trust the police. Too, you've got to be able to have a police force with integrity for the poor to be protected. So that's what's happening. They're training police forces. They're trying to, that kind of work is really good and inspiring. Yeah, I played around with a lot of themes in that book, where I have read books for many, many years, and I've also responded to some of these tropes in books, like the magical Negro trope. An old Black person shows up, like Morgan Freeman in a movie, sort of solves the problem and then has no backstory or no. And so when I wrote Grandma V, I spent a lot of time imagining her life, giving her a backstory, knowing her specific cultural origin, her language, who she was as a person, what she had experienced. So sort of turning that magical Negro trope on its head, saying, well, here's a wonderful, loving, older Black woman, but we can know her. We don't have to just use her as a foil. We can really know her. So one of my favorite things is when people say, I want a Grandma V, or I love her, she's my favorite character, because I worked hard to make her move from a trope or a stereotype into a real character. And the other theme that I loved is that outside savior theme, where you think we can go in as Americans and save the day. We're here to rescue these girls, and we're just so great, and we think so well of ourselves, and that's always bugged me. So I was able to kind of turn that on its head and say, oh, Mom, you can't do that.
Oh, yeah, more than once.
Yeah, so that was really fun to write, but hopefully in a gracious way. Yeah. So there's a lot in that book that are themes from my own life of wanting to help other people, and lessons I've learned. And there's a lot of nuance in it that I think someone who knows me really well will understand, but hopefully other people who can intersect those themes in different ways themselves.
Well, it was glorious.
What's you're dear. Love it.
Where's your next book? Come on.
Yeah, I just signed a contract for 2, but it's middle grade. So not YA. So my agent suggested I try middle grade, because I've had some success. Like the Rickshaw Girl and Tiger Boy have actually really been successful.
I bought it when you were here. When was it? Last summer?
A year ago, yeah.
And I was sitting there, I'm like, oh, human trafficking, that's sad. Oh, India, I've never been there. I don't know what it's like. And then when I finally jumped in, I was like, oh my God, my best book of the year.
Oh, and I know, and all my Maudis are saying the same thing, my Maud Hart Lovelace friends, as you are. So Yeah, hopefully, I think does put people off. Those are heavy themes, and
Yeah.
people don't want heavy themes, but there's a lot of hope in the book. We're
Maybe
going through a heavy time now, but I always believe that if we cling to hope, and that's what the book's about hope in the
yeah.
middle of a hard time.
Maybe
Yeah.
if they put like a little sticker that says the feel good human trafficking book of the year.
I know when I tell people that I wrote about human trafficking and abuse and with a Bollywood feel and a humor and romance, they're like, what the heck?
What's wrong with you, woman?
I know that's a strange place my brain is in. It's like human trafficking, Bollywood. Yeah, but the book has its moments of humor and
No,
light.
it
The
does.
lines are good. I can't write a book that's so heavy that it's like just you know,
Yeah.
what half of that laughter is just bleh.
And this cover is gorgeous.
Yes, the cover is absolutely gorgeous. It's kind of a vintage cover, you know. It doesn't. I think it's going to not be trendy.
Yeah.
It's cool. The paperback's coming out, and they're going to use the same cover because it
Oh,
was so
good.
beautiful. I don't get to choose the cover or anything like that. I wasn't quite what I imagined the characters to look like because in my mind, Kat looked more biracial. On the cover, I think
Uh-huh.
she looks black,
Yeah.
and which is fine. She's gorgeous on the
Yeah.
cover, but in my mind,
She's
she
so
seems a little more
strong.
racially sort of ambiguous, and people couldn't tell what she was. Robbie looks fine. Robbie was the fine on that. He's cute on the cover.
So
Yeah.
I Googled the name of the movie star that he's always being mistaken for, and it turns out there's a guy with that name who's like an accountant in Fresno. And I'm like, well,
It's a really common name. I picked a really common name just so I wouldn't get in trouble. People are funny. People are like, well, why didn't that guy be his dad? And I'm thinking, what the heck? That was the point of that is that he got to be, you know, when you're a brown person growing up in the United States, you don't get to see yourself as a hero, as a leading man very
yeah.
often, especially a brown guy. You know, I think there's a lot of Asian women that get tokenized and whatever, but brown guys don't get to see themselves be the leading guy, like the romantic lead. And so when he goes there, one of his surprises is that he discovers he's being mistaken for a romantic lead and he has such low idea of himself in that he's always been kind of a sidekick. And so for him to be mistaken for a leading guy who's like a hot, sizzling, romantic guy was just this great feeling for him. So that's all I didn't want it to be some sort of strange thing that, you know, he would have to discover some biological connection. For me, it was just that discovery. That happened to me, Barb. I was in India, but it was the opposite. And people kept stopping me and saying, "Are you this act?" Naming a name. Are
Uh-huh.
you her? Are you her? And so for a while, I was like, I look like a celebrity in India, and I was all puffed up. And then
Mhm.
my cousin said to me, "Well, who are they saying?" And I told him the name, and he turned on the TV, and it was this really chubby, sort of ugly old comedian that was like the laughing stock of every show. And so I thought, next time someone said, "Are you Sharmila Shen?" I was like, "No, I am not."
And
So,
thanks for nothing.
yeah, exactly. So I'm walking around India thinking, great, I look like this dumpy comedian, but it was fine. It
Oh,
was, but
that's
I sort of
funny.
had experienced that in a negative way. I wanted him to experience it in a much more positive way. Well, thank you so much for this
Thank
talk. It's so
you.
nice to chat with you. And if you want to be more, just let me know. I'm happy to, you know, whatever, to answer more. But so
Okay.
fun to talk about this book that, you know, especially when I was feeling a little discouraged, like, oh, it's not reaching readers. So
Aw,
thank you for sharing about that and
you are
encouraging me.
welcome. I loved it. And hopefully,
Uh,
hopefully my 37 viewers will go look for it.
viral. And I don't even know if that word works anymore, right? Like, it was
Oh, yeah, it's kind of
go
negative
viral.
now. Thank you.
Hi, guys.
Bye
Thank you,
bye.
Barb. Bye.